The judge sentenced the father unfairly to 30 years in prison, but his 14-year-old daughter said no. At the Michael Stone Criminal Court, a 45-year-old man with a deeply lined face sat silently in the defendant's chair, his dark-ringed eyes fixed on the floor. He knew well that the verdict had already been decided. A staged trial, where the truth had been buried under layers of corruption and lies. Businessman Caleb Parker had been stabbed to death in his own home, a case with no DNA evidence, not a single fingerprint belonging to Michael. Everything was clean, except for one thing, the testimony of the sole witness, Joseph Reynolds. Reynolds, a middle-aged man with a scruffy beard, a grimy face, and eyes that dodged every question, had taken the stand and sworn that he saw Michael at the scene. But there was no video footage, no security camera had captured that moment. Just a lone statement like a stick used to beat a man who was already down. "Your Honor, may I say my final words?" Michael spoke, his voice hoarse and choked, as though he had to drag each word out from his chest. Judge Teresa Davis, a woman with eyes cold as ice, sat sternly in the judge's chair, unmoved. She slammed the gavel. "Court is adjourned. Defendant Michael Stone is sentenced to 30 years in prison for first-degree murder." The courtroom fell into silence, broken only by gasps and the sobs of Emily Michael's 14-year-old daughter. She trembled, tears streaming down her face, her voice cracking, "Dad, it can't be like this." A guard stepped forward, gripping her arm and pushing her out of the courtroom. Emily struggled, screaming in desperation, "Let me see my dad. Just one last time." But her cries were cut off by the cold slam of steel doors. Michael was escorted out of the courtroom by the guards. But as he passed through the door, he turned back, his eyes red, looking at Emily, eyes full of sorrow but still burning with strength. "Believe me. Don't trust anyone here." Those whispered words felt like a curse pressing down on Emily's heart. She sat outside the courtroom hallway, sobbing uncontrollably, burying her face in her hands. In another corner of the courthouse, James Morgan, the defense attorney who had fought hard for Michael but was ignored, stood helplessly watching Michael's figure being led away. He gripped his case files tightly, his voice rising with fury. "Teresa, you ignored every piece of alibi evidence. This isn't justice, it's a disgrace." Judge Davis didn't respond. Her eyes were sharp as blades, forcing James into silence. Across the room, witness Joseph Reynolds sat hunched, glancing nervously around as if looking for protection, his face pale. His assistant, a middle-aged man named Carl Riley, whispered in his ear. "Joseph, just be patient. The money is coming. Everything will be fine. $500,000, right?" Joseph whispered, his voice trembling. Carl nodded. "Yes. That's the deal. Stick to what we agreed on. Nothing will happen to you." Outside the courtroom, Emily clung to Aunt Rose, the only relative still beside her. Rose, a woman in her 60s with a tense expression, couldn't hide her disappointment. "Sweetheart, we tried everything we could. Your father is guilty," Aunt Rose said, sighing, her gaze distant. Emily turned to her, eyes filled with anger, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You don't understand. Dad didn't do it. Someone is hiding the truth. That's the court's business. You shouldn't meddle," Aunt Rose replied coldly. "I won't give up," Emily said firmly. "I'll find the truth." Aunt Rose shook her head and walked away, leaving the girl alone in the middle of the cold and indifferent crowd. The next day, in a small, cold cell at New York City prison, Michael sat slumped on the floor, his hands trembling as he clutched a small folded piece of paper. His eyes stared blankly through the narrow window where faint sunlight struggled to enter. A prison guard named Eric, a tall man with a weathered face but calm eyes, stepped into the cell. "Mr. Stone, visitation time is almost over. Get ready," Eric said evenly. Michael nodded, but before rising, he whispered to himself. "Daughter, you must believe me. Don't trust anyone else." Outside, Emily wrote letters every day and sent them to the prison. Each one soaked in tears, filled with silent pleas. "Dad, I miss you so much. I won't give up. Please stay strong." Week after week passed with no reply. She called the prison, her voice trembling. "Hello, may I ask if Mr. Michael Stone has received any letters from me?" "Mr. Stone is under special supervision. He's not allowed to receive letters from outside," came the cold response. Emily was stunned. She secretly recorded the call, listening carefully to the voice of the prison staff, a voice that seemed to be hiding something. "We're just following orders. Sorry for the inconvenience." One gloomy afternoon, Emily stood in front of her family's old storage shed, her eyes scanning every dark corner of the dusty, cracked building. No one had cared for the house in years. Her heart ached thinking of her father's terrifying silence in prison. She thought to herself, "There has to be a way to learn the truth. There has to be." At a small cafe near the courthouse, young lawyer Evan Carter, 22, sat across from Emily. Evan had once helped defend Michael during the trial but was pressured to remain silent. "You need to be careful, Emily," Evan said in a low voice. "What you're doing could put us both in danger." Emily stared at her cold coffee, unafraid. "I don't care. If I don't act, my father will die in there and no one will ever know the truth." Evan sighed, looking at her with a mix of sorrow and admiration. In the bleakness and despair of that unjust trial, the last embrace between father and daughter in the courtroom had etched into Emily's heart a faint belief, cold and painful, yet the only thing she could cling to as she fought the darkness shrouding her future. Time passed, but the pain and injustice never faded for Emily. A month had gone by since the trial closed with the cruel sentence against her father, and all that remained was a chilling silence. The letters she sent were left unanswered, no replies, as if her father had disappeared into the shadows of New York City prison. Each week, Emily carefully folded a letter, writing words of love and desperate hope, then sent it off with the faintest trace of faith. But nothing came back. She didn't dare call the prison often, only occasionally, her voice trembling as she asked. "Hello, this is Emily Stone, daughter of Mr. Michael Stone. I'd like to ask if he's received any letters from me." The phone operator replied coldly, "Mr. Stone is currently under special supervision. He is not permitted to receive letters." Emily froze, then forced back her tears and gently asked, "Why not? Isn't he allowed to get mail?" "That's the facility's policy," the person answered without further explanation. After the call, Emily quickly saved the recording. The voice of the prison manager tried to sound calm, but she could hear the unease, the fear of being overheard. "We're just following orders," the voice trembled, "please understand the current situation." Emily listened, her heart tightening. Someone was deliberately blocking her communication with her father. At home, Aunt Rose became increasingly tired and bitter. Whenever Emily brought up her hope or desire to investigate the case further, Rose immediately opposed her, even criticized her harshly. "Girl, your father has been sentenced. That's it. Don't do anything foolish," she said wearily. "Why do you think he's guilty?" Emily shouted, eyes red. "I know he's innocent." Aunt Rose sighed, looking at Emily with suspicion in her eyes. "You don't see the truth. People don't convict someone without evidence. Your father did something terrible." Those words pierced Emily's heart like knives. She bowed her head, tears streaming down, feeling more alone and hopeless than ever. One afternoon, as weak sunlight shone through the living room window, Emily sat at her desk, hands trembling as she wrote another letter to her father. "Dad, I know someone doesn't want us to talk. But I won't let them win. I'll find the truth, even if I have to face everything." She folded the letter carefully, thinking to herself, there must be a way to uncover what's going on in that prison. Dad can't be in there with no hope. At a small cafe where she often met lawyer Evan Carter, Emily shared the situation. "Mr. Carter, I haven't received a letter from my father in over a month. When I called, they said he's under special supervision and can't receive mail. I feel like someone's trying to keep us apart. Evan frowned, looking at her with deep concern. That's not a good sign, Emily. If they've really applied that kind of restriction, your father might be under close surveillance. We have to be careful. I'm not afraid, Emily replied, her eyes burning with determination. I have to find a way to contact my dad. I can't let him be alone in there. Evan sighed, then lowered his voice. I'll try to help you, but this has to stay quiet. If word gets out, things will only get worse. Inside the prison, Michael felt the suffocating isolation closing in around him. The other inmates looked at him with contempt as if he were a traitor, a man rejected by society. Every day, he was watched closely by guard Eric, who barely allowed him any outside contact. All incoming letters were held back, never reaching his hands. Michael clenched his jaw, fighting to contain his pain and anger. Michael, Eric said one day, his tone icy, you'd better understand that staying quiet will make life easier for you in here. Michael looked straight into the guard's eyes. I won't stay quiet when I know I'm innocent. The truth has to come out. Eric frowned, then turned away, leaving Michael with a heavy sense of emptiness and helplessness. Another day, in the prison yard, Michael received a cryptic look from an inmate named Luke Davis, a gaunt, weathered man serving time for theft, who seemed to know a lot about what went on inside. Luke whispered to Michael, "Be careful, Stone. This isn't the place to play justice. If you don't want trouble, you better stay quiet." Michael growled, "Silence isn't an option for me." Luke shook his head, his eyes filled with warning. "You'll pay for it." Elsewhere, Aunt Rose continued scolding Emily every time she brought up her father or her intention to dig deeper into the case. "Your head is full of dreams. Don't drag the whole family into trouble," Rose snapped coldly. Emily replied, her voice firm with resolve, "I won't let this go. I have to find out who put my dad in prison." Rose sighed and walked away indifferently, leaving Emily alone with her pain and helplessness. In a secret phone call with Evan, Emily shared the chaos swirling in her mind. "Lawyer, I don't understand why things are so bad. Why are they silent, forbidding my dad from receiving letters, even limiting visits?" Evan answered cautiously, "It's possible someone is trying to stop your father from speaking the truth. Maybe a powerful force, someone with influence in the system." Emily bit her lip, her eyes red with tears. "I can't just sit here. I have to do something." Evan looked at her with sympathy. "Be patient, Emily. But be careful. This isn't going to be easy." One evening, Emily sat quietly on her bed, the dim light from the window falling across her face. She held tightly to an unsent letter, overwhelmed by helplessness. "Dad, I'm scared. I don't know how to help you. Someone's trying to destroy everything." But she told herself, "I won't let it happen. No matter what, I'll fight." Meanwhile, at the courthouse, a few acquaintances of Michael began to question the fairness of the trial. Michael's old friend, Ryan Thompson, a well-known businessman in New York City, said to attorney James Morgan, "Something's wrong here. I can't believe Michael would do something like that. But how do we overturn the sentence?" James frowned. "I don't know. Only if new evidence comes to light." Ryan looked him in the eye. "Hope is slim, and danger is plenty." With each passing day, Emily felt the terrifying silence devouring her family. The coldness, the suspicion, and the bitter words were wounds that wouldn't heal. Yet in her heart, a small flame, though flickering, still burned. Each unanswered letter, each interrupted call, every doubtful glance, and each scolding word became an invisible shackle tightening around Emily, pushing her into a lonely war against a terrifying silence with no way out. After weeks of pleading relentlessly, Emily was finally granted a visit with her father. The time was strictly limited to 15 minutes, a short window, but just enough for the two of them, father and daughter, to see each other after a painful separation. On the scheduled day, Emily arrived at New York City prison, her heart heavy, carrying a small bag filled with unsent letters. The guard at the door, a man named Frank, had a face as cold as stone and eyed her with suspicion. 15 minutes only. No shouting, no touching anything, Frank ordered sharply. Emily nodded, doing her best to remain calm. As she stepped into the visitation room, cold fluorescent light cast pale shadows across Michael's gaunt face. His eyes were sunken, but they lit up at the sight of his daughter. "My girl," Michael whispered, his voice raspy, "I've missed you so much." Emily sat down, tears running down her cheeks. "Dad, are you okay? I've sent you so many letters and never heard back." Michael shook his head slightly. "Didn't get them. They blocked everything." Emily gripped his hand, her voice trembling. "You have to stay strong. I'll find a way to help you." He stared at her intensely, then suddenly lowered his voice to a whisper, trying to avoid the surveillance camera and guard audio mics. "You need to find the phone, in the shed, under the floorboards. Everything is in there." Emily froze, eyes widening in shock. "Phone?" Michael nodded weakly. "Yes, sweetheart. I can't say more. They're listening." Before she could ask anything else, the guard Frank stepped in and motioned for her to leave. "Time's up. Let's go," Frank said rigidly. Michael forced a tired smile. "Believe in yourself. You're my only hope." Emily bowed her head, tears choking her. "I won't leave you." As she exited the visitation room, Emily felt her heart shatter yet somehow grow stronger with a sliver of renewed hope. On her way home, she couldn't stop thinking about her father's strange message. A phone in the shed, under the floorboards, she wondered, could that be the last clue to saving him? Back at home, Aunt Rose looked at Emily coldly when she mentioned the visit. "You shouldn't get your hopes up," Rose said heavily. "Your father's in hell. There's nothing you can do." Emily snapped back, her voice filled with resolve, "I have to try. If I don't, he'll die in there." Rose sighed and turned away, leaving Emily standing there, overwhelmed with emotions. That night, Emily quietly returned to the old family house, anxiety and fear swirling inside her. The shed was filled with dust and darkness, but she knew she had to search. A weak flashlight beam lit up the old wooden floor. She knelt down and used a small tool to pry up the boards, her heart pounding with each second. After several minutes, she found it an old Nokia phone, battery removed and covered in dust. Her hands trembling, Emily turned on the phone, surprised when it still powered up, albeit weakly. She navigated to the voice recordings and heard a chilling conversation. "Reynolds, the $500,000 will be wired to your account. All you need to do is testify as we agreed." "I'll take care of the rest," said a cold, familiar female voice. Emily gasped as she recognized it the voice of Judge Teresa Davis, the very woman who sentenced her father. Tears streamed down her face. Her hands shook. She couldn't believe it, the entire case was a staged, criminal setup. The next day, Emily went to meet attorney Evan Carter, her voice trembling as she recounted her horrifying discovery. "Mr. Carter, I found this recording on my dad's phone. It's Judge Davis. She took a bribe to make Reynolds lie under oath." Evan looked at Emily, his eyes filled with worry but also a glimmer of hope. "This is major evidence, Emily. But we have to be very careful. If they find out you have this, it could be dangerous." Emily nodded. "I'm not afraid. I have to protect my dad." Evan sighed. "Then we'll need a solid plan." Meanwhile, in the prison, Michael heard about the visit through an inmate named James, who had good ties with some of the guards. "Word is your daughter's really determined," James said cautiously. Michael gave a weak smile. "She's the only light I have in all this darkness." James looked at him, then spoke quietly. "Be careful, Michael. Not everyone wants the truth to come out." That first visit after the long isolation gave both Emily and Michael a fragile ray of hope, but it also opened the door to danger. Michael's strange clue about the phone under the floorboards was now the key to cracking open the darkness surrounding justice. As night fell, the sky over New York City was covered in gray clouds, reflecting the storm brewing in Emily's heart. She stood in front of the old house, the streetlight casting a dim yellow glow on the cracked brick walls. Cold wind blew through the gaps in the wooden doors, creating a chilling whistle through the silence. Inside Emily's heart, a nameless fear mingled with a faint hope. She stepped into the tiny shed room, dust thick over the old wooden floor. It had been nearly a month since Michael had whispered those words to her. That cryptic warning still haunted her every night. The phone, under the floorboards. She took a deep breath, put on gloves, and carried a small screwdriver. Carefully, she began to pry up the wooden planks. The soft creaking of wood broke the heavy silence of the room. After a few minutes, a small gap appeared beneath the floor. Emily reached in and pulled out an old Nokia phone, its battery removed and covered in a thick layer of dust. Finally, she whispered, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. When she powered it on, the phone emitted a faint beep. Emily navigated to the voice recordings. A cold voice played through the tiny speaker. "Reynolds, $500,000 will be transferred into your account. All you need to do is testify as we agreed. I'll take care of the rest." Emily jolted forward, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. That voice, cold, sharp, was unmistakably Judge Teresa Davis, the very woman who had sentenced her father. Tears welled up in her eyes as she covered her mouth, trying to muffle her sobs. No way. It was all a setup. A trap, Emily whispered, her voice trembling with grief and rage. The next morning, Emily brought the phone and recording to Evan Carter, the young attorney who had once supported her family. "Mr. Carter, I have solid evidence that my father was wrongfully convicted because of a bribery conspiracy," Emily said, her voice shaking but full of resolve. Evan listened intently, his eyes fixed on the tablet screen. His face grew pale as Judge Davis's voice rang out clearly. This is truly shocking," Evan exhaled. "If authenticated, this recording could overturn the entire trial." Emily looked him in the eye. "I can't wait anymore. I want justice for my father." Evan nodded. "We have to proceed very carefully. The people behind this, they have power." Meanwhile, at home, Aunt Rose remained skeptical and discontent. "All of that is nonsense. You're just imagining things, Emily," she said with annoyance. "You don't understand. I have proof." "I'm not stopping," Emily replied firmly. Aunt Rose stared at her wearily. "If you stir things up, you'll only bring danger to yourself." That night, Emily lay in her room, her thoughts racing. The audio recording from the old phone had kept her awake for many nights. The fear of being discovered, of being punished, was constant. She remembered her father's words in the prison visiting room, "Believe in yourself. Everything is in there." If it weren't for that phone, everything would have been buried in darkness forever, she thought. One afternoon, Emily met again with Evan to discuss the next steps. "Mr. Carter, I need your help sending this recording and all related evidence to the Supreme Court. They must re-examine the case," Emily said. Evan nodded. "Okay. But I need to carefully review every detail before we send anything. If we don't do it right, they could dismiss it immediately." "I'll help you gather more evidence," Emily affirmed. The next day, in her small room, Emily began organizing every document related to the case: court transcripts, letters, the recording, and even a journal of Reynolds she had recently found. The darkness didn't end outside. Inside the prison, Michael Stone was still facing endless nightmares. One evening, as he lay on the rock-hard bed, he suddenly heard footsteps nearby. A mysterious inmate named Alan approached, his face shadowed by secrets. "You know, Michael," Alan whispered, "not everyone wants the truth to come out." Michael frowned. "I'm not afraid. I won't stay silent." Alan stared at him, his whisper laced with warning. "Be careful. Your enemy is closer than you think. Another day, in the prison hallway, Michael was again warned by Eric, the cold correctional officer. You should remember where you are. If you keep pushing, you'll be walking into your own grave. Michael replied, justice cannot be buried by threats. Eric gave him a cold stare, then walked away without another word. At home, Aunt Rose remained distant and disappointed whenever Emily brought up continuing the investigation. Don't think you can change anything, she said, her voice filled with despair. Emily stayed silent, her heart burning with anger and determination not to give up. In a secret call with Evan, Emily confessed. Mr. Carter, I'm scared someone's watching me. They want to destroy all the evidence. Evan reassured her, stay careful and keep everything hidden. Things are getting very dangerous. That night, Emily whispered to herself. No matter what happens, I won't let my father be abandoned in the dark. The secret beneath the floorboards had ignited a small flame in the suffocating night, but it also opened the door to danger, filled with traps and dark conspiracies. Emily and Michael now faced the greatest challenge yet in their pursuit of justice. The grim days following the wrongful verdict hadn't dulled Emily's anger or despair. The 14-year-old girl, small but fierce, decided she would no longer stand by while her innocent father was buried in prison like a condemned man. She turned her pain into action, transforming herself into a warrior on the path toward justice. On a cold evening, Emily sat in front of an old computer screen in her tiny room, tirelessly studying the floor plan of New York City prison that she had found online. Her dark eyes shimmered with hope and fear. I have to find a way to bring the truth out. If no one speaks up, my dad will be forgotten forever, she whispered to herself. Numbers, maps, security doors, elevators, she etched everything onto paper and into her memory. The next day, Emily met Evan Carter once more. Mr. Carter, I need your help. I'm planning to create a fake fire in the prison kitchen to cause chaos and disrupt the security system. That way, my dad might have a chance to escape, Emily said, her voice shaky but resolute. Evan frowned. That's a very dangerous plan, Emily. One mistake, and your father could be killed or punished even more severely. I know, Emily replied. But I have no other choice. I can't just sit and watch him die in there. Evan looked at her with deep concern, but he didn't say no. If you're truly committed, I'll help, but we have to keep this completely secret. In the following days, Emily quietly contacted a gas deliverman named Miles Anderson, an old family acquaintance who could help sneak a small fire-starting device into the prison kitchen. Mr. Anderson, I need your help. Can you sneak in a small device to create a fake fire? Emily pleaded. Miles looked at her, surprised at first, then nodded. I know what happened to your dad, Emily. I'll help you, but be careful. On the day of the incident, Emily stood outside the prison gate, her heart pounding, a crumpled prison map clutched in her hand. The fire alarm blared. Security systems went on alert. Doors throughout the prison briefly unlocked in the confusion. Emily held her breath, waiting in fearful hope. But when the moment came, Michael didn't run. Emily watched in anguish as he stood still, calm, his eyes filled with sadness but firm. Before the guards pulled him away, Michael handed her a small folded note, whispering hoarsely. The truth must be revealed through law, not by running. Emily collapsed inside, her heart crushed. Why did Dad give up his only chance? After the incident, Emily returned home overwhelmed, tortured by questions with no answers. Aunt Rose saw her pale, broken face and said sternly. You need to stop these foolish games, Emily. You don't even know what you're doing. Emily replied coldly, I'm not foolish, Aunt. I'm fighting for my father. Rose shook her head in disappointment and walked away in silence. That night, Emily called Evan, her voice weak. Mr. Carter. I don't understand. Why didn't my dad escape? That was his only chance for freedom. Evan sighed. Michael is a man of principle. He believes the truth must come out through the law and not by running away. But I feel so powerless, Emily said, choking up. Evan reassured her, "You're not powerless, Emily. You're doing more than most adults ever could." The staged fire incident didn't just exhaust Emily physically, it weighed heavily on her mind. Each night, she woke from nightmares filled with images of her father locked away, the court silence, and the threats looming in her memory. Haunting questions swirled endlessly: who was against them? When would the truth come? Would they be defeated? One day, as Emily was rereading all the documents and notes, her phone vibrated. A message popped up in glaring red text. "Shut up. You have no idea who you're messing with." Emily trembled, her hands barely able to hold the phone. A wave of fear surged through her, a wall of threats closing in on her small frame. Aunt Rose saw the message and panicked. "You need to go back to the countryside to stay with relatives. It's not safe for you here anymore." Emily wiped her tears, voice fierce, "I can't leave. I have to fight for Dad." Aunt Rose sighed, her eyes filled with worry. Emily's heart felt like it was being torn apart, trapped between threats and an unbreakable will. She knew she was walking a dangerous path, but there was no turning back. "If I don't do this, Dad will die in prison," she whispered to herself, tears falling freely. The failed escape plan had left a deep wound in Emily's soul, but it had also ignited an even fiercer resolve. Despite the growing threats and pressure, she became an unyielding warrior in the darkness of injustice and corruption. The days following the fake fire were the darkest yet for Emily. She felt the stares, the surveillance, and the veiled threats lurking around her. Life, already suffocating, became unbearable, the pressure, impossible to breathe. One drizzly afternoon, Emily received a call from an unknown number. A deep, cold voice came through. "Be quiet, Emily. Stop digging for the truth. If not, there will be more than just threats." She bowed her head, hands shaking, tears flowing, too afraid to speak. The next day, as Emily left school, a black car pulled up nearby. Two men stepped out, their eyes scanning her with a cold and threatening gaze. "You should know your limits, Emily," one of them said gruffly. "Stop bothering people." Emily swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. "I just want my father to be treated fairly." The other man sneered, "Fairness? In this world, there's no room for fairness, little girl." Back home, Aunt Rose noticed Emily looked pale and dazed. She asked firmly, "What happened, Emily?" Emily shook her head, keeping everything bottled inside. But Aunt Rose could feel something was wrong. One night, as Emily was sorting documents and evidence to send to Attorney Evan, she found a strange letter left at the front door. It had just a few scribbled lines in red ink. "Shut up. You have no idea who you're messing with." Emily picked it up with trembling hands, feeling as if thousands of knives were stabbing her chest. Aunt Rose shouted in anger, "You need to go back to the countryside now. It's not safe for you anymore." Emily stood her ground. "I'm not going anywhere. I have to fight to the end." Aunt Rose sighed, her eyes full of fear. "You foolish child. You'd be wise to back off." Emily called Evan, her voice shaking. "Mr. Carter, I've been threatened. I don't know what to do." Evan reassured her, "Stay calm, Emily. Keep everything secret. I'll find a way to protect you." In the courthouse, Attorney James Morgan spoke with Mr. Ryan Thompson. "This is getting out of control," James said. Ryan frowned. "That girl is going up against powerful people. We can't underestimate this." That night, Emily sat in her room, clutching her unsent letters, tears pouring down. She felt utterly alone, as if she were lost in a maze with no way out. In the darkness, the threats weren't just external, they also came from within the people around her, pushing Emily to a dangerous psychological edge. She stood at the brink of despair, yet clung to a fragile hope, refusing to stop fighting for her father. The faint yellow glow of her desk lamp barely pierced the cold atmosphere of the small room where Emily sat. Exhausted, she stared at the stack of case files on the table. Each page held fragments of a buried truth. Each word, a silent scream echoing within the empty room. "I have to find something, anything," Emily whispered, her eyes fixed on the court transcripts. Her life had been drained, both physically and emotionally. The threats still loomed. Aunt Rose continued to complain, even going as far as to say, "Your father deserved it, Emily. Stop dreaming. The truth isn't something that can be changed so easily." But Emily didn't listen. Her heart was driven by an invisible force. She knew if she could find even a single overlooked detail, everything might change. That day, Emily combed through the documents, searching for something unusual. "Crime scene camera lost signal from 11:12 p.m. to 11:15 p.m., she read aloud, her voice hoarse. "That's when the murder happened," she whispered, eyes lighting up for the first time in days. What shocked her even more was a note about a nearby bank's ATM camera. It had been fully operational during that exact time. "That means, someone might have passed through the area and been recorded," Emily said, nearly shouting. That night, she came up with a bold idea. She decided to go to the bank near the crime scene and pose as an adult to request access to the security footage. The next day, wearing a thick coat and a hooded cap, Emily walked into the bank, eyes full of determination. A security guard named George, a stern-looking middle-aged man, stopped her. "Sorry, miss. Not just anyone can view the surveillance footage," George said. Emily took a deep breath and replied softly but firmly, "Sir, I'm here on behalf of my father, Michael Stone. This is his student ID." She handed George a card with a signature and verification stamp. George examined it carefully, hesitated, then finally nodded. "I'll help you, but this has to stay between us." Once approved, Emily sat beside a small monitor, eyes glued to the screen. With George's help, she scanned the footage from 11 to 11:30 p.m. on the night of the murder. Then, it appeared a tall man wearing a dark coat walking away from the victim's house at exactly 11:13 p.m. In his hand was a knife, clearly stained with blood. Most importantly, his face was clearly visible and it wasn't Michael. He's not my dad," Emily gasped, her heart racing. The image was crystal clear, even the license plate of the car the man drove off in was captured. Emily raced home, her heart pounding with hope for the first time in months. She immediately called Evan. "Mr. Carter. I found something that could overturn the whole case. The video shows a man leaving the scene and it's not my dad." Evan exhaled, equal parts relieved and cautious. "That's incredible, Emily. Now we need to compile everything and submit it to the court." In the days that followed, Emily and Evan worked tirelessly, gathering all they had. The ATM surveillance video showing the real suspect leaving the scene. The audio recording of Judge Teresa Davis bribing Reynolds. Reynolds' discarded journal stating clearly, received $500,000 from Davis. Everything was carefully compiled, ready to be sent to the Supreme Court with an urgent appeal. The story began to attract attention from the media and social networks. Evan contacted a reporter from the New York Times, one of the largest newspapers in the United States. A 14-year-old girl proves her father was wrongfully convicted. The hashtag Justice for Michael quickly went viral online. The public demanded the case be reopened. Under immense public pressure, the United States Department of Justice was forced to schedule a review of the conviction within 48 hours. Judge Teresa Davis was suspended overnight pending an internal investigation for bribery and judicial manipulation. In her small room, Emily cried, but this time, they were tears of hope. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, "You are my hope." The overlooked detail had become the biggest crack in the wall of lies, a sliver of light in the fight for justice for Michael Stone. Though the road ahead was still long and filled with danger, for the first time, Emily no longer felt alone in this brutal battle. Immediately after Emily and attorney Evan Carter submitted all the evidence to the Supreme Court, tension and anticipation hung over everyone involved. At the New York City Supreme Court, inside a large chamber with cold stone walls, senior judges gathered to review the emergency appeal. Presiding over the hearing was Judge Ellen Marks, a stern woman known for her deep sense of justice. She opened the session. "We have received new evidence related to the case of Michael Stone. These materials and videos could completely alter the course of the case." One of the judges asked, "What exactly is the evidence, Ellen?" She responded, "A video from an ATM camera capturing a tall man leaving the crime scene, clearly not the defendant. There's also an audio recording of Judge Teresa Davis bribing the witness, Joseph Reynolds. Additionally, Reynolds' journal details receiving $500,000. A heavy sigh echoed through the chamber. Everyone understood the gravity of the situation. Outside, the media sprang into action with a wave of explosive headlines. Isabel Grant, a journalist for the New York Times, posed a question at a press conference. "Emily, how do you feel proving your father's wrongful conviction?" Emily, her face glowing with hope, replied, "I just want justice to be served. My father is innocent, and the truth must be exposed." The hashtag justice for Michael spread rapidly across social media, creating a surge of support demanding the case be reopened. In an internal meeting at the Department of Justice, Secretary Logan Harris stated firmly, "We cannot ignore this new evidence. We must handle this case with complete transparency." An assistant whispered, "Judge Teresa Davis may need to be suspended immediately." Logan nodded. "Exactly. We cannot allow corruption to take root in the justice system." Back at court, a re-evaluation hearing was convened within 48 hours. The courtroom was packed with journalists and supporters of Michael Stone. Evan stood beside Emily and whispered, "Get ready, Emily. The truth is about to speak." The courtroom doors opened. Michael Stone entered, his gaze strong, though his body showed signs of exhaustion. Emily ran to him, gripping his hand tightly. As the hearing began, Prosecutor William Riley, who had once pursued the case, now faced its unraveling. "Your Honors, we have in hand new evidence, sufficient to overturn all charges against the defendant," Evan declared with confidence. He played the ATM video on a large screen. All eyes turned to the footage showing a man leaving the crime scene, clearly not Michael. "This is not Michael Stone," Evan emphasized. "We also have audio of Judge Teresa Davis bribing a witness to lie under oath." The courtroom was deathly silent. Across the room, Judge Teresa Davis sat pale-faced, her hands trembling as she clutched her chair. When called to respond to the corruption accusations, she snapped, "I deny all charges. This is a smear campaign, a conspiracy to ruin me." But the audio evidence was undeniable. A judicial affairs judge announced Davis's immediate suspension pending investigation. Joseph Reynolds was summoned as a witness. His face was drawn with fear as he was questioned. "Why did you lie under oath and accept money from Judge Davis?" Reynolds stammered, I had no choice." The judicial panel looked at him with disgust. Meanwhile, the press continued to break updates on the case, reporting on the collapse of corruption within the justice system. Isabel Grant interviewed Emily outside the courthouse. "How does it feel to see the truth finally revealed?" Emily, her voice shaking but full of pride, replied, "I just want everyone to know that justice is never easy. But if you persist, the truth will prevail." After hours of deliberation, the court officially vacated Michael Stone's conviction, dropped all charges, and ordered his immediate release. Michael couldn't believe his ears. Tears streamed down his face as he embraced Emily. "You're the greatest hope of my life. I thought I would die in there." Emily choked back tears. "I believed in you, and I knew justice couldn't stay asleep forever." Joseph Reynolds was arrested on the spot for perjury and bribery, facing a heavy prison sentence. Judge Teresa Davis was stripped of her robe and indicted for corruption, judicial misconduct, and multiple related charges. Further investigations were launched to uncover the entire corruption network within the New York City judicial system. The public kept the hashtag Justice for Michael trending, honoring the courageous spirit of a 14-year-old girl who dared to stand up against an entire corrupt system. The trial ended with applause from the crowd, while Emily and Michael held hands, looking toward the future with hope in their eyes. The truth had been revealed, and justice had begun to prevail in a long, painful battle filled with suffering and injustice. But this was only the beginning of a greater journey to restore fairness and trust for the Stone family. The massive steel gates of New York City prison slowly opened, footsteps echoing across the cold concrete floor. Everyone gathered outside turned their attention to the exit, where a weary figure emerged into the soft winter sunlight, determined eyes shining through fatigue. Michael Stone, a man wrongly imprisoned for nearly 3 years, was now free, his life and honor restored. Emily stood outside the gate, her eyes lighting up as she saw her father. She ran to him, throwing her arms around him, sobbing. "Dad! You're finally home!" Michael cried, hugging his daughter tightly, voice choked with emotion. "I thought I'd never leave that place. You did what 100 adults couldn't do." Emily smiled through tears. "Because I believed in you. And because justice must never fall asleep." Photographers and reporters captured the emotional moment, while sirens sounded like a victory anthem. Right at the courthouse, Joseph Reynolds was led away in handcuffs, charged with perjury and bribery, facing a severe sentence. His eyes filled with panic as he was escorted out. Judge Teresa Davis was officially disbarred and indicted for corruption, trial tampering, and numerous other charges. Widening investigations aimed to expose the full web of corruption in New York City's justice system. One afternoon at PBS National Television, Emily was invited for a live interview. The host asked her, "How does it feel to be the 14-year-old who overturned a seemingly impossible conviction?" Emily, shy but confident, replied, "I just want to say that no matter how small you are, you can do something great if you don't give up on truth and justice." News outlets devoted front pages to celebrate Emily, with headlines like, "The girl who took down a rotten justice system." In Burlington, Vermont, where Emily and Michael moved to rebuild their lives, hope and peace filled the air. Michael opened a small coffee shop where he could chat with locals, while Emily began writing her memoir, titled 3 Days for the Truth. One quiet afternoon, someone asked Emily what her happiest moment in life was. She answered, eyes gleaming, "Not because my dad is free, but because the world was forced to listen to a 14-year-old girl." The painful, tear-filled journey of Emily and Michael opened a new chapter, one where justice could no longer be hidden by the shadows of corruption, where even the smallest voices could roar. Their story teaches us that justice is not always easy to achieve, especially when corruption and injustice take hold. But the power of belief, perseverance, and the courage of even one small person can shake an entire broken system. Sometimes, the truth must be fought for and revealed with integrity and strength, even when the path is harsh and dangerous. What matters most is never giving up hope and always believing in justice.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.